The Epstein files have been getting more attention recently, and this next piece should definitely add to that. Earlier today, Glenn Beck said that Kash Patel will release the Epstein files on his first day as FBI director. Watch.
The only thing I care about is the scandal of the pedophiles, and in the next 10 days, you're going to see the Epstein file released.
In the next 10 days?
Next 10 days.
Oh, please.
You think in the next 10 days the whole thing's going to be released?
Yeah.
And what kind of information you have to be able to be that certain about it?
I plead the fifth.
In the next 10 days?
The next 10 days.
Oh,
Glenn,
please.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Next 10 days.
You're
I'm telling
teasing millions who want that list.
Day number 1, Kash Patel walks in. By the end of the day, it will be released.
Oh.
That is certainly a bombshell. Here to break this down with us is Blaze senior politics editor Chris Bedford. So, Chris, I mean, does Glenn know something that we don't? What's going on here?
I mean, Glenn doesn't bluff. If he says he knows something, and you see that twinkle in his eye and that smile, you know him. I believe it when he's up there. It sounds like he's got some mischief up his sleeve and has been talking to people who are intent on this. Kash Patel, who's obviously related to this, has been someone who has had access to these documents. He's talked about these documents in the past, particularly regarding the JFK assassination, what is being held back, and how it's important for the American people to be able to see it. And in the first Trump administration, when the president promised to release some of these documents, he was frightened away from it by the skiff, essentially. He was frightened away from it by the intelligence assets, the people who said, oh, this would break norms, this would be a threat to that part of national security, this part of national security. And all of the credibility of those types of people has really been shattered. It's turned out that over the last couple of years, they have largely been protecting their own. They've put secrecy over openness as far as the American people can go. The incredible increase in the percentage of classified documents that go through our government has gone through the roof in the last 50 years in a way that was never true before. So steps like these, when you've got an intelligence community pushing back, their word carries a lot less value than it did previously. And at the same time, the Trump administration is kind of high on their successes. The American people have responded positively to their decisions. Democrats have been freaking out, basically howling into the wind to no avail, and they're feeling empowered to do more.
So I guess one could argue that if you didn't want the Epstein list out, which presumably some powerful people do not, this would further your antagonism towards the confirmation of Kash Patel, and you would work even harder to stop that. Which leads me to what a great time to talk about where we are in terms of the confirmation battle with Patel, since they're still, flinging mud at him. Has anything, changed in the last 24 hours, do you think? Or is he still looking like he's sailing towards success?
There are still clear seas ahead. The problem for Kash Patel is that there's a lot more ocean ahead than was initially expected. Mm-hmm. And storms can absolutely always sneak up on you. Democrats have pulled every trick in the book. They've used every single tool at their disposal, parliamentary procedure, to prolong this for as long as they've been capable of doing so. And in the hopes in that time of being able to dig up enough dirt on him or cause enough trouble for him to get some Republicans to pull back. As we've seen with Lisa Murkowski's recent switch on Tulsi Gabbard, that vote will be later tonight, at least it's scheduled for around midnight. As we've seen with a couple of other different aspects, the RFK confirmation, which is expected by tomorrow, you realize that the Republican willingness to push back is kind of ending. I mean, you had Mitch McConnell vote for cloture, which is just a procedural vote, for going ahead on Tulsi Gabbard's vote. I think if Democrats and squishy and neocon Republicans had been successful in sinking Pete Hegseth's nomination, then you would not have seen someone like McConnell vote for cloture and to move ahead. They would have felt empowered. But success breeds success, and failure breeds failure. And the neoconservatives and the Democrat allies are in retreat at the moment. They're not in power.
Well, it's a big day for declassifying documents. Representative Paulina Luna has been appointed by the House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer. She's going to lead a task force on the declassification of federal secrets. And her and Comer had a press conference earlier today. Let's take a look.
We'll be conducting investigations into the following: the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, unidentified aerial phenomena, also known as UAPs, unidentified submerged objects, also known as USOs, the Epstein client list, the origins of COVID-19, and the 9/11 files.
Right. So we've heard the Trump executive order. Now there's going to be an entire task force for this in the House. So how is the deep state going to try and block this one?
Oh, they're so up the creek on this. They're in so much trouble. I mean, all of these sorts of things could have been treated by a lot of responsible society as conspiracy theories just 8 years ago. I mean, there was a period of time where, like, basically the only person on air who was talking about UFOs with any kind of major platform was Tucker Carlson, and it annoyed the heck out of his bosses. And it even made some eyebrows among his friends. Although he developed, it was kind of funny, a really strange kind of hippie fan base because of it. People you wouldn't expect to be huge Tucker fans turned out to be huge Tucker fans because of his work with UFOs. But at the same time, and now that huge rush of Trump insanity and completely fake news stories, you would be forgiven for not noticing that the Pentagon acknowledged their existence. The federal government acknowledged their existence. And as some senators have pointed out, and powerful people I've talked to who have access to U.S. classified intelligence, you got a couple of different questions here. Either they're man-made, and we have no idea what they are, which is extremely concerning from a defense point of view, or they're not man-made, and we have no idea what they are, which is extremely concerning from a defense point of view. Either way, these are things that ought to be known and stop being knocked down as simple conspiracy theories. The same thing about the origins of COVID, which was used to shut down media outlets or attack media outlets, undermine their credibility and slow their reach, choke them out in social media and hit their profits in advertising. And used to run doctors and other well-regarded people in the medical establishment out of that medical establishment from questioning these sorts of things. The MLK assassination, of course, which has some questions, but significantly less. RFK, JFK, these are sorts of things that it's a society that moves towards openness and is no longer letting the IC decide what we're allowed to see and when we're allowed to see it. A lot of this stuff is kind of already out there. A lot of this stuff has been discussed. And I do actually suspect that as opposed to finding some kind of crazy Atlantis conspiracy behind it, more and more documents and more openness will put an end to some of the conspiracy theories, will defeat how these sorts of things came out. You'll start to understand, all right, here's what actually was known. And those sorts of things are good. Light is good on these on dangerous questions.
Yeah, the more light, the better. You have to admit, it was somewhat hilarious when she teased this. The congresswoman said, it's bigger than aliens. And then it turns out, because it's all the things, all the clickbaity things are all in this task force. We're going to do RFK, we're going to do JFK, we're going to do all the things. Great. Fantastic. We should also get a little update on Doge because, Doge is still operating and moving. I mean, just to pick two things from today, you have cutting $900 million apparently from the Department of Education. And then you have Elon Musk tweeting about, we will absolutely look into individuals in the federal government with a oddly high net worth and, make sure that there's no untoward behavior, which has to really scare the pants off a lot of people right now in Washington, D.C. What's your take on how Doge is evolving?
And you can make a lot of money if you simply make the exact same trades, buys and sells that Nancy Pelosi and her husband make the second that they make them. You can do quite well in the stock market. It makes you think that people who do have inside knowledge are acting on that in a way that is illegal. So if you look at who's making all that money and where it's stored, it's good. And it's also good to see the executive order come through. We're coming down to a fight with the courts. The courts, and I'm going to go into this in my piece in the Beltway brief tomorrow, so I won't give away too much before we talk about it then. But the courts, what they're doing essentially here is lawless. Congress has surrendered a huge amount of its authority over the executive, and now the courts are trying to claim that the executive doesn't have authority over the executive, that the blob is some kind of creature, this endangered creature that must be protected in the rainforest, like a moth or a butterfly. How dare you go after this? No one's in charge of this. It exists on its own. It's its own ecosystem. It has its own rights. And that's completely ridiculous. That the fact that the Trump administration is still pushing on every single one of these levels and giving more authority to it, as President Trump did with his executive order today, saying that Doge is now actually officially designated as having authority in the federal government. is going to be great. And they're going to win these lawsuits. It's the thing is, I mean, you got a judge in Manhattan, an Obama appointee, claiming that agencies aren't allowed to have access to information within their own agencies. That doesn't make sense. Not only is that just a complete break of separation of powers, but it's stupid. It's just patently stupid. The problem, and I'll go into the problems for why it's going to take a while tomorrow, but I do think that in the end, this next round of judicial lawfare is going to be defeated.
Yeah, and today we saw Representative Eli Crane come out, and he has articles of impeachment out now for a U.S. District Judge, Paul Engelmayer. And this is the guy who was blocking the freezing of the funds being audited by DOJ. So I know you're going to be writing about this tomorrow, but at this point with these judges and everything that we're seeing, is this going to be the beginning of this? Are we going to see more moves like this?
Well, I think we're going to see most of that come from the Supreme Court, because I will tell you right now that the United States Congress does not impeach enough federal judges. There are some absolutely batty, crazy moonbats out there who are sitting on the bench and have been for a long time, because Congress doesn't even think to take away their judgeship. Like literally people who have gone half crazy on the bench, or people who are complete and total political partisans on the bench. But you can't do that with a 2-vote majority, and I don't see Democrats joining. You need to get to, I think, 2/3 of the House of Representatives in order to actually be able to change that and to impeach a judge. And then I think it goes to the Senate. It's been a little while since I reviewed all of these things. So I like the moves to put them on notice, but don't expect the Congress with a 2-vote majority to start kicking these judges out of their courthouses anytime soon.
Well, I mean, the more they talk about it, the better. Though I want to hear, I want to hear Republicans seriously talk about what should happen, which is that when you manifest this level of politics, which is obvious because of the outrageous, it's not ignorance, right? I mean, they
know the law and they're breaking it. They're violating the spirit of it. They're violating the letter of it. Yeah,
you can't say this is ignorance of the Constitution. You can't assume that they're fundamentally lacking that many brain cells. You have to say that this is egregious political behavior and should be treated as such. We should talk briefly about RFK, though. I don't want to forget about him, since RFK is waiting to be confirmed as Secretary of HHS. Washington Post has recently ran this piece analyzing his past statements on vaccines. Of course, chastising his claims that vaccines are not tested vigorously enough. I imagine that there are some special interests behind this article. There are special interests on all sides of this. What do you make of this article, this attack, and what do you think of his trajectory moving forward, given that they're still going to be throwing a lot of mud at him as well?
I mean, it was so perfectly illustrated by the back and forth between Rand Paul and the chairman of RFK's committee, Cassidy, when Rand Paul was saying, maybe we should show just a little bit of humility in these matters of medical science. These are two doctors going back and forth. I mean, we were told, sit down and shut up. And literally, you could be arrested. People floated arresting you and banning you from society if you didn't take the COVID vaccine. Cases were shut down left and right. My wife, who was in her late 20s at the time, suffered immediate heart problems from this and had to wear monitors on it. And the doctor told her in Washington, yeah, I've seen many such cases. No one was allowed to talk about that in the news. My cousin's son, who was a teenager and an athlete, had immediate heart problems. And he had to whisper about it because he would be threatened with losing his job at his fancy school if the parents in the area found out that he had questioned this. So I'm not really, and I don't think the American people are interested in people saying that the science is settled. That's complete bollocks. Science is not a religion, although it's treated by a religion by all those people who post it in front of their houses like it's the Nicene Creed. In this house, we believe in science. Well, science is a method where you go towards discovery. And a lot of these vaccines, I mean, the reality is, just like the ingredients in the foods that we ate as children and our parents ate as children, on the same products have changed dramatically in the last couple of years. The level of vaccinations that children are exposed to have upped dramatically. And some of those are safe and some of those are fine. But the schedules, you're not even allowed to question that. It's become a partisan thing on pediatricians' websites. You will go by the CDC's guidelines. You will go by their schedule. And if you want to slow the schedule down, you are putting your patients in danger and your children are not welcome in this establishment. You're not allowed to have any control. in loco parente has become in loco doctor or in loco school. They're the first people who have authority over your children. Bill Cassidy and Rand Paul went back and forth on whether or not you should be giving this type of hepatitis vaccine to children. And Cassidy's thing was, well, some of their prostitute and drug addict parents don't want to tell us, so therefore all children must get it, or they can't leave the hospital. That's completely insane. It's a wild thing to say to enforce that on all American children, but that's kind of the basics, and it's the level of authority and bullying control that they feel they have, moral authority. And, you could have convinced the American people of that about 5 years ago, but absolutely not again.